This is a presentation of Northeast Streaming Sports.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Mac and Jack Show, the debate show on Saturday. And I'm here with Dr. Paul. I am your guest host today, filling in for Mac. Jamie Pags, the Philly sports guy. Jack should be here any second as he's getting figured it out. Because when Mac's not here, things are always a little funny. So we're getting everything all put together. Doc, how you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing great. And, it's kind of funny. We got the Mac and Jack debate show with James and Paul. So
sometimes it works that way, and luckily we both know a little bit about some sports, so we can definitely carry the show. But hopefully Jack will come in here very quickly. I expect that it should be just a second before he stops on in. So, of course, good morning. Today is, of course, Kentucky Derby Saturday. Do you ever get excited about the Kentucky Derby at all? Is it something that kind of just passes by you on your radar?
it's one of those things that kind of passes by me on the radar. I look at the names of the horses. This is the extent of my horse racing knowledge, and I pick who I think is going to win just based on the name. And a long time ago in the 80s, I think I got two of them. I'm not even sure. I think I picked Snow Chief and Ali Sheba. I'm not sure if Ali Sheba won the Preakness or the Kentucky Derby, but since then, even my picks aren't correct. I pick a good name. So anyway, if you want, I decided today that Smile Happy, who on the Kentucky Derby site is a 14-1 horse, which I guess puts him in the middle of the pack. I decided Smile Happy is a good name, and that's who my pick is. Based upon no science whatsoever.
Take it to the bank, everybody. There you go. Smile Happy is going to be the winner today because Dr. Paul says so.
Yeah, don't go there.
So I normally will watch the Kentucky Derby, and I have been to only one of the three major races. One time, I got to watch Smarty Jones come in second place up at the Belmont after winning the first two legs of that. And I was all excited because of course, Smarty Jones was a Philly horse, and I had ordered on eBay. I got a ticket from the Kentucky Derby, and then I got a winning ticket from the Preakness. And I went up there to the Belmont literally to get a winning ticket so that I was going to make a frame of all three tickets. I was never going to cash in any one of them. And of course, he came in second. So that ended that whole thought process. But it was really interesting to watch. I mean, just all the fanfare that goes around these races is something that's really exciting to see. Obviously, the hats at the Kentucky Derby is kind of more funny to watch than the race itself. And it seems like the horse races go on and on and on before you actually get to the actual Derby itself. And it's sometimes it's easier just to turn it on at about 6:25 and hope that you got it in time, because sometimes they go off a little early, sometimes they go off a little late, and usually it's somewhere around 6:30. But I like looking at the hats. Today is going to be a mess though, because I got to imagine if you're like anywhere up here, I mean, it's been pouring and raining all day long and all yesterday, so I expect that track is going to be muddy and wet. As it was like a couple of years ago, from what I remember. I remember that track being sloppy. So, well,
that if it's a muddy race, then the favorites and stuff, that changes everything, right?
Absolutely. Because the favorites are still going to be the favorites, but
it's
a
just different
makes
race.
It much different race. So you would definitely see some, one of the horses that are maybe 30-1 or 25-1, like a good trifecta. Could be a really big payout because of one, there's so many horses. So you do have a couple of horses that go off to 50-1, 100-1, and you put one of those in that mix, and now all of a sudden you have a $2 bet could pay thousands of dollars. So it'd be interesting to see if anybody does one of those types of bets and is able to get a trifecta or a superfecta, as you were, which is like picking four horses, and hopefully somebody can win a lot of money.
Well, it looks like the longest odds are Rich Strike is at 99-1. There's a horse called Tawny Port, 67-1. Classic Causeway at 67-1. Pioneer of Medina at 47-1. And Summer is Tomorrow at 42-1. Now, this is all on the Kentucky Derby site as of this morning. So I don't know. I'm liking Smile Happy. It's 14-1. Who knows what's going to happen? I don't know anything about it. So I just pick a name.
Exactly. And that's kind of me. It's like, ooh, those are pretty colors kind of thing. So, and that's kind of how I would deal with it. I don't do much gambling myself because I like to keep my money when I have it. So, but investing $2 or getting into one of those, derby pools where everybody picks a number and that's your horse is fun. So hopefully everybody enjoys their time today watching the Derby. It is the fastest 3 minutes in sports. But let's get started here because I figure Jack is still trying to work it out. He should be back here fairly soon. And since you are a big baseball guy, I think it's best to get started right with a baseball question.
Yeah, let's go right to baseball. We could spend the whole time talking about the Yankees and the Phillies.
Exactly. Well, you could probably talk a lot more about the Yankees right now. The Phillies, that was such a being a New York guy, I can't imagine that you're a really big fan of the Mets. But did you see that comeback?
Oh, the other day in the ninth inning.
Yes,
the Mets have been amazing. You know what? We could talk about this for a minute, and I've been talking about this on my site, Start Spreading the News, and on the Start Spreading the News YouTube show. I was listening to New York sports radio a couple of weeks ago, and one of the voices on one of the channels was all mad at Spike Lee because Spike Lee had gone to a Nets game, and he's the big Knicks guy, and he kept saying, like, you can't be a Knicks fan and go to the Nets game and be a Nets fan. And I found the whole argument absurd. Philly, you basically have one team in the city, and so you root for that one team. But this idea that if you are a fan of one team in New York, that you have to hate the other one, to me, just doesn't make sense. I mean, there could be any millions of reasons why you like one team and dislike another, or like one team at a certain point in time and dislike another. Like, I disliked the 86 Mets passionately. I did not like those guys at all. But the Mets of today, they're milquetoast. Like, if they win, that's great. They're not playing the Yankees. And of course, their manager's a former Yankee manager, Buck Showalter, who I've always liked. I like Buck. So if the Mets win and Buck gets a lot of recognition for being a great manager, I'm happy. So yeah, I don't have any problem with the Mets winning, and I have no animosity towards the 2022 Mets.
Well, and they're doing really well this year. Obviously, it's that was a very historic loss that the Phillies took on Friday. I think it was teams went in there 0-326 when you went into the ninth inning with 6 or more runs, you were losing by. So obviously the Phillies, amongst everything else, obviously they are one of the oldest franchises out there. They do have the most losses amongst every team that plays professional sports out there. So with over 11,000 losses, and they haven't quite gotten to 10,000 wins yet, although I do expect that could happen this year. But to see a loss like that really is can deflate a team for a long time. And consequently, I think that the Mets could actually use that win as something that propels them to really great things. I kind of feel that, the Mets, as I like to say, always Mets it up towards the end of the year.
Yes, they do.
And they could really start to propel themselves to be the team to beat, where the Dodgers are struggling a little bit coming out of the gate. And I know that they were the team really that everybody was looking towards as possibly going to the World Series from the NL. The Mets are coming out strong, and they really aren't even fully together yet. DeGrom hasn't pitched a game. Scherzer is, I still think that he's beatable now. He's not even in midseason form yet. So once they start to put all those pieces together, the Mets are really going to be a tough out. You're going to need to try to win 2 out of 3 when you face them to be able to get anywhere against them. And I think it's going to be hard for anybody in the NL East to do it, let alone anybody in the NL just in general.
And they have, I don't want to keep going back to Buck Showalter, but they have a different manager now. And Buck Showalter comes in with a reputation of being an excellent manager and someone who knows how to work with a team. He knows how to be almost Billy Martin-like. He's done that a couple times this year, finding an obscure rule and doing something out of the box and finding ways to get wins for his team. And when teams start winning, then they start believing, right? I still play baseball. I played on a great team last year that had won the whole league the year before, and nothing went right. And when you start losing, even professionally or obviously just playing old man men's baseball, but all of a sudden everything starts going wrong and you start to expect things to go wrong. And when things start going right, all of a sudden you expect that someone's going to come through and get a hit. And there's just a different attitude that you take to playing your position or pitching or hitting that, you know what? If I don't get it done, the next guy's going to. And I think the Mets are at that point where they're really starting to believe. They believe in the manager. They believe in each other. And they also believe that the owner is going to do whatever it takes to get them the players they need in order to win. And I think that makes a big difference.
I can agree with that. I liken it to the 2008 Phillies because that's really what I have to compare it with, where it was that it was always like the next man up and everybody had each other's back. And, I think about the Colorado game in the playoffs where, Ryan Howard said, just get me to the plate and this game is over. And literally they made sure he got up and he finished that game. He closed that game out. And it was that type of mentality that said, okay, we got to do whatever we can to make sure that we can do, to move forward, and that everybody had everybody else's back. And that's what you're starting to see with the Mets. I don't think that they have, like on paper, their pitching staff is great, but their normal, their normal nine isn't. And the fact that they're putting it all together right now and starting this season out early, obviously they've got I think they're 19-9 right now. That's
most wins in baseball.
Yeah, exactly. So that's going to play a part. I feel like the more you win now, the less you have to win later. And, over 162, you're going to have some ebbs and flows. They're going to have a small losing streak and, a couple of games in a row. And it's a matter of how you feel now and where you're at. Obviously there's 7 games up in the East already. And it's, it doesn't look like they're about to stop, that this is a train going fast. And the more speed they pick up now, the better they're going to be at the end of the season.
I think you make 2 great points there. If you win now, it takes the pressure off having to win later. And one of the things that's frustrated me with the Yankees in recent years is they seem to get out of the gate very slowly. And then they pick it up. They actually do the opposite of what the Mets do. The Mets seem to come out of the gate fast and then, as you say, Mets it up. The Yankees have to then really put the pedal to the metal oftentimes in August and September to push their way into the postseason. And I'm a big believer that a win in April counts just as much as a win in September. You just have to get those wins. And people like to say, it's a marathon. It's not a sprint. And I've always found that analogy to be incorrect. I run marathons. And so, and I don't win them, obviously, but I run them. And I pay attention to the big ones. I pay attention to New York, especially. And I've never seen a guy win a marathon by saying, oh, you know what? I'm just going to take it easy in the first couple miles. No, they're running sub 5-minute miles from the start. They're not taking it easy. They're not sprinting as much as they might if it's a dogfight at the end, but they're running hard and they're running fast from the start all the way through. They're not saying, well, it's 26.2 miles. I think I'll just run a 10-minute mile to start. I'll take it easy, because you do that, it's over. Right. And they have this idea that sometimes, well, you don't have to win these games in August and April and May, because the season's so long and anything can happen. Right. But by the time anything happens, you might already be out of it. So get those wins early. I'm not saying you have to, burn out your bullpen in April and May. That's just stupid. Just like you don't run your fastest mile in the first mile, but you have to still run a good mile, a strong mile, and a hard mile all the way through. And you have to play good, hard, smart baseball all the way through. And, I think back to the 84 Tigers. They got off to such a great start that they basically put the season away, and they, rode that all the way to a World's Championship in that year by getting out of the gate and doing great at the start. So, yeah, I absolutely believe the Mets are doing everything they're supposed to do to get themselves in the best position throughout the summer and into the fall.
See, and I kind of agree with you with that. I have my own saying that that I believe that every team wins 60 and loses 60. It's what you do with those other 42 games that really makes the difference for every season. And the more that you win now goes towards those 42 games that you're going to have the wins, you're going to have the losses, and that any day you could have a really great day or a really bad day. And it's, like for instance, I put their win yesterday or 2 days ago in that 42. I don't put that as part of the 60 because that's a signature win. And that's something that's going to create more wins because of that win rather than, oh, well, we turned it on. Because turning it on and off, that proverbial switch that these players have, is not the easiest thing in the world to do. And you hear it more on other sports like basketball or football, or that, we're going to turn the switch on as we get closer to the playoffs, like in hockey and things of that nature. But that's not really the case, because I feel like it's more muscle memory that takes hold, where you are doing the things right now. If you continue to do them right, it's going to always be right. If you stop doing them right and you try to take it back and take it easy, it's hard to get back in motion again. And that's where I kind of feel that, if you start out fast, you're going to continue fast.
I agree 100%.
So, but let's get right to our questions. Trevor Bauer has been in the news, obviously, with some of his escapades out in real life. And obviously, the commissioner has suspended him for 2 years or 324 games. And obviously, he's been kind of out right now on administrative leave, on paid leave. And all of those games that he left on paid leave do not count to the 324. So it could be possibly 3 full seasons that he's going to be out. And of course, he just signed a contract for over $100 million for 3 years. So first off, are they justified by suspending him without any? I mean, obviously they do have criminal complaints, but he hasn't been charged.
I think sports do. It's a business. There's a different level of proof that you have to come up with in order to determine these decisions. And I don't know what happened, and I have to be honest with you. I haven't really read a great deal about any of it because the whole thing is just bothersome. When it comes to sports, I love sports because I love sports, right? I love what the guys do on the field. And what happens off the field is often less interesting to me in so many regards, the good stuff and the bad stuff. You want the players all to be good people and to be heroes, and that's what you want. From the moment you're a little kid and you start watching these guys, you say, oh my goodness, I want these guys to be great people, and I hope to meet my hero. And if you meet your hero, you want him to be a good guy, and all of that. I get all that. But they're humans. And if you look at any human, I'm sure there are times when they're not the best that they can be in certain situations or whatever. And I think we all try to be the best we can be always. But there's going to be good guys in sports, and there's going to be bad guys in sports. And so I haven't really followed the off the field stuff with Trevor Bauer. Obviously, you hear about it, and so you get a understanding of it around the edges. But I'm not really following a lot of it. But all of that being said, he did some bad things, or he's being accused of bad things, and baseball did an investigation. It's a different level of burden of proof in this investigation than it would be in a court of law. And baseball looked at the evidence and they said, you know what? This is worthy of a long time suspension. So I have to trust that they did the right job and they did a thorough job and they're making their decision based upon the facts they have. And if they want to send a message like, we are not going to tolerate any of this kind of stuff in our business, well, that's a good thing. And so I would have to say I have to trust the process. I have to trust Major League Baseball. And if they think his suspension deserves this long, then it probably deserves that long. That's where I'm coming from on that.
Well, and I believe that they may have taken a little bit of a hint from the NFL and listened to some of what the NFL's the flack that the NFL gets for sweeping things under the rug in comparison to baseball. Baseball can't afford to take that type of hit. And even on the Phillies, there is a player who kind of, not the same type of situation, has actually gone through some counseling for domestic abuse and things of that nature. And the fans have not let him forget that. And obviously, I'm a firm believer of yes, it's, everybody deserves a second chance, that these guys are athletes and they operate at a different level than most of us, that I feel that that these players are driving at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and we're on the road too, and they're just blowing past us, and we just say, oh, well, they're being reckless. And, but that's just the way that they live. And I kind of feel the same way about football players and that like that. It's just that they operate at a different level than we do in general. So that when they have a crash, that it's much more cataclysmic. And that's kind of what happened here, where this is, everybody wants to, he's a single guy. He's able to have consensual whatever. However, he's got to be prepared for some of the backlash if things don't work out well with some of the lady friends that he chooses to be with. And especially when you're doing things at that, craziness is what we're hearing. I mean, obviously, he likes things a little on the rougher side. He chooses women who enjoy things on the rougher side. But he's also making millions of dollars. And when women are driving at that level, they can act just as erratic and crazy. And not to say that they are improperly, that they are, that this was all okay with what he did. I'm saying that you just have to be a lot more careful with who you decide to share your bed with. And that's where
and all the decisions, right? I mean, I think you make a great point that these guys are living lives that none of us understand, right? From the earliest day, that was the kid. All of them are the kid that was picked first in the Little League draft, was the shortstop on the team, was the quarterback on the team, was the number one defender on the team, whatever it was the starting center, or the point guard on the basketball team. And everybody their whole lives has treated them probably a lot differently than everybody else. Oh, yeah, that's Bobby. Well, that's Bobby, right? Look at Bobby. And they've lived a life in a different way of having privileges that the other kids don't necessarily have, because everybody's given them deference in sports, and that sports carries on into other areas of their lives sometime. And so then they get thrown millions of dollars, because if they make it, they become these the greatest of the greats. And there are millions of temptations. And I think that's one of the things that happens in sports. We talked about the 86 Mets before. All of the drugs and the things that were there for some of those guys to get involved with and abuse. When you're living in that life and people are just offering you this and they're offering you that and they're offering you the other thing, it becomes hard, I would imagine, for these guys, especially they're young guys from their 20s. They haven't had a life to really experience to be able to make good decisions and to be forced to make smart decisions sometimes. And then sometimes they find themselves caught up in these situations. Again, what Trevor Bauer does in his own life is his own business to a point till it becomes problematic. And again, I don't know. I wasn't there. I don't know what was on the minds of the other people. I know that a complaint or some complaints were filed and that baseball investigated it. And they said, whoa, it looks like you went over the line. And so again, I have to trust that what they did was the right thing. Now, if we find out that what baseball did was the wrong thing, that's a whole different discussion.
You know, when I think about, just if you put it in terms of population in general, where we have 350 million people in the US and there's 8 billion people in the world, there are only 5,000 professional sports jobs at the highest levels. Obviously there's leagues in other countries and things of that, but I'm talking a major league and the NHL and NFL and things like that. When all is said and done, there's only 5,000 jobs or less than 5,000 jobs to get paid very handsomely as a professional player. So yes, I agree that those are the guys that are always picked first and are their team captains and just and have always had that. And it's interesting because college kind of weeds that out because you have so many of them, and then all the cream rises to the top, and then of course the draft then chooses all those people who rise even further. So when you get like your first in the first round, if you get chosen in the first round of any NFL draft, that's a culmination of so many things that you've been already a 4 or 5-star blue chip recruit in grade school to high school to college and now to the NFL. So it's amazing to kind of see how you see just how somebody goes from starting at birth and having a football in their hands at 2 years old and 3 years old, all the way to winning a Super Bowl like Patrick Mahomes or like Joe Burrows was trying to do, and things of that nature. That Joe Burrows was a 5-star recruit, all the way back to middle school. Like he went to special middle schools because of his talent that he had. And that's rare because not everybody gets that opportunity. You either have to ascend to be able to get those types of accolades to be able to get chosen first, or you're already predestined, as like Joe Burrows kind of was, where he was getting all of the best teachers, all of the best people around him to make sure that he succeeded. And now he was really, maybe one drive away from winning the Super Bowl. So it's interesting to kind of see that. I know we jumped away from like Trevor Bauer, but it was just, I feel that this is something that kind of transcends throughout all of sports. And, something like this, I know that all of the major leagues have different counseling for their players, especially because they're receiving a lot of money. And when you're a rookie and you're getting millions of dollars, all of a sudden you want to get like punch drunk, in a spending spree. And you want to be able to curb that because everybody's going to have their hand out. And the more that you're willing to give, the more that people are going to take from you. And even that goes with just your normal everyday life where, hey, you're just out at a bar and, hey, well, why don't you buy me a drink? You know what I mean? And it's like, well, why do I have to buy you a drink? But that's because you got the money and I don't. Well, it's not really like that. So there's a lot of different ways that this kind of comes into play. So is it 2 years worth it? I think to make the statement, yes. Do I think it'll withhold? No. I think that they're going to wind up having to bring that down some, probably suspend him for a year and let that be, let that kind of be the thing. But I think that the precedent is set that you can't do this. And if you get caught doing this, that it's going to be a problem and we're going to take it very seriously. So I applaud MLB for doing that, especially after the whole steroids thing. They can't let something like this occur, especially when they see the NFL and the whole Deshaun Watson situation occur and how they've dealt with it. I think, like I said, they took a page from their own book and said, you know what, we're not going to deal with it this way. We're going to be much harsher.
And the big question will be when the suspension's over, whether it's 2 years or 1 year or something in between, will a team even want him? Right. Because he comes now with a whole lot of baggage. Now, if he is able to adjudicate this and prove he's innocent, that's a whole different thing. I'm not very sure that would happen, but just in the general sense, if that were to happen, maybe a team says, "Look, he was innocent." But if he challenges this and the facts come out and it's as bad as it seems, I mean, I can't imagine a team ever wanting to have Trevor Bauer on their pitching staff.
I kind of agree with you, or they have to be in a very specific type of situation where that they feel, especially being out of baseball for 2 years. How do you go back in and start to try to pitch again? Anyways, obviously he's got the contract, so he's going to wind up getting paid that third year. But ultimately, is he going to be worth it? Are the teams going to have any recourse to be able to get out of that contract because he hasn't played for 2 years? It's going to be tough for the Dodgers to do anything, obviously, after spending that money and him signing on the dotted line, because this isn't the NFL. Obviously, every contract is you get every penny as long as you're allowed to. Obviously, not getting paid for 2 years, he's going to need that third year, and he's going to make sure that he gets paid for it, as I'm sure the Players Association is, because the Players Association obviously has some say in this, but although they can only fight it so much, he did do some of this stuff to cause, this investigation in general. And, it's like you can fight it and try to do whatever you want, but ultimately they're going to make sure that he gets paid for that third year, especially because he's been out. And it doesn't matter what he looks like or if he's even a major league pitcher once he comes back. So it's just an interesting story all the way around. And going from that, let's talk about, so question number 2 that I have on my list is it okay for announcers that work for the team that they are employed for to root for that team? I'm going to start with you. I want to hear what you got to say.
All right. So I became a Yankees fan in the late 1970s when they had probably one of the most entertaining voices doing radio and TV, the wonderful Phil Rizzuto. Now, Phil Rizzuto was a lifetime Yankee. He played for the Yankees and then became a Yankees announcer, and that's where he spent the rest of his life. And obviously, he rooted for the Yankees. I watched the Yankees listening to the Yankees announcer rooting for the Yankees, and I loved it. I have nothing wrong with that. John Sterling, who does the radio games still, has been doing it since the late 1980s, calls a fair game, but even he says, like, I've lived with this team for all these years, and I follow this team 162 games a year. Why wouldn't I want them to win? Why wouldn't I be excited when they win? Watching a winning team and announcing a winning team is a lot more exciting than announcing a team that's losing. So, if you're Troy Aikman or you're Al Michaels or you're doing games on national TV or national radio, right, that's a national audience, and those people expect a fair game being called. But if you're a local announcer and your team is the team that's paying you and you're announcing those teams' games, I don't think it's terrible for that announcer to root. Now, if they root in such a manner where they're being unfair or they're just saying things that are ridiculous, well, then that person's not a very good announcer. But if I'm announcing the Yankee game and Aaron Judge hits a walk-off home run and I get a little bit excited, I have no problem with the announcers getting a little bit excited because it's exciting. And if they lose a game in terrible fashion, I don't have a problem if the announcer's like, line drive, base hit. Oh, unbelievable. Yankees lose. What an unbelievably terrible finish, like the Phillies just had, right? Like, you want the announcer to be a little bit upset because you're a little upset. And right. It's not wrong for a hometown announcer to have feelings and to show emotion in any which way. So I have no problem with it.
So, and I agree with you here, and I think that this transcends even beyond baseball. I mean, obviously there was Harry Kalas, who was a great announcer for the Phillies. He lived and died Philadelphia baseball, and just listening to him talk about the game and do these games were great. He added to Philadelphia, the whole thing with the Philadelphia Phillies, and in the off season, he called the games for the Giants. And if you're a Philadelphia fan, like I said, I was driving through New York and the Giants were playing, and you listen to the radio, and it's like, why does that voice sound familiar? And there it is. It is Harry Callis doing Giants broadcast. And it's like, well, why isn't he doing the Eagles broadcast? Well, that's because they had Merrill Reese, and Merrill Reese was a staple, And I remember growing up loving hockey, and it was Gene Hart, and it was just listening to his voice made the game special, and it made things really worthwhile. So I kind of agree with you where that once you get to the national broadcast, obviously I know Philadelphia really does not like Chris Collinsworth or Joe Buck. Obviously they always feel, and I'm sure that there's other fan bases that feel exactly the same way, where they just always feel like that those announcers are talking against them and they're always talking up the other team. And the truth of the matter is that I can imagine every team feels exactly that same way, because you're always hearing about the other team. When they're talking about your team, you're too busy hearing it and smiling about it than to actually understand that they're talking about your team. But when they're talking about the other team, that team stinks and whatever, and you don't want to hear about that. You want to hear about your team. So, and that's some of the things that happen with the national guys in comparison to, the local broadcasts. So I agree. I think that they are employed by the team, that they should toe a little bit of the company line in terms of make sure you want to call it fair and such like that, but you also want to get excited. You want to be able to add to the fans' experience of listening to that game, and I feel that that's really the best way to go about that, rather than just being straight laced and all right, you're just announcing this game and you're not supposed to be a fan of that team. I don't think that that's a real thing. I think you want a fan to talk about the game for the fans, and that's really what I feel is how that works best.
I agree.
So, well, and still waiting for Jack. I'm thinking he's I hope he's that he didn't fall under a rock or something like that, and that there's not something heavy on top of him that he can get up and out and maybe get back on the show here. So
he might be watching and saying, like, you and I are doing such a great job that maybe he's saying, like, wow, I'm just going to take this Saturday off.
Maybe, but I don't know Jack to be of few words. So, he likes to get his 2 cents in sometimes,
He does, and these are the questions he developed. So I'm sure he's trying to get in somehow. It must be a tech. Maybe I was on last week and the internet went out on me, and so in the middle of the show, poof, I was out for 10 minutes. So who knows what could be happening with all the rain
with these storms? With these storms that are passing by. Although, he always looks like he's in Florida. So I don't know.
I think he's home now. He was home. He was in Florida. I think he's home now.
So maybe he's getting just some technical difficulties from the storm. Hopefully everything's. Hopefully, Jack, you're okay if you're listening, and that you get in here as soon as you can. If
yes,
not,
we miss you, Jack.
We got you all covered. I expect to see a flamboyant shirt when you do come on. So, moving forward, let's go to number 3. The streak that's more likely to be broken in professional baseball. There's 3. There's 2 that were written on this. I added a third one myself, and I want to hear, since you're definitely a baseball guy. So Joe DiMaggio's streak of 56 games, Cal Ripken's, Iron Man streak of the 20. I don't have that number written down, but I think it's somewhere a little over 2,400. And then I added Hack Wilson's 191 RBIs over the course of a season. And out of the 3 of those, which one do you feel is more likely to be broken?
Yeah, I think the one of those 3 that's most likely to be broken, actually more likely, I like the way you said that better, because I don't think any of the 3 will be broken anytime soon. They've all stood the test of time. The most recent, of course, is Cal Ripken's streak, but that's now 30 years old or whatever. It's getting close to that. It's got to be. But Hack Wilson did his, I think, in 1931, and DiMaggio's was in 1941. So you're talking decades and decades and decades that these records have lasted through lots of changes in the sports or in the sport. Now, let me just break them each down. today there is just so much energy spent looking at things like load management, giving players a chance to rest. It's very rare that you see a player even play in 162 games in a season, let alone play 162 games every day for a decade or more in order to even approach Cal Ripken Jr.'s streak. I also think that during Cal Ripken Jr.'s streak, as it got longer and longer and longer, the streak itself became almost something that hindered the manager's ability to put the best team out there on any given day, because you can't sit Cal Ripken Jr. Not that they had anybody better, maybe, but on any given day, you might say, Cal could use a day off, but I can't give him the day off because I got this streak. And I don't think managers or teams want to be put in a position where the streak becomes the most important thing. But again, teams just don't play everybody every game. So I don't think that's a record that will ever even be approached. I don't think you'll see somebody get to 500 games in a row. It's just, I don't think it's going to happen. Yeah, go on.
It's interesting because I was just kind of a part as a fan, obviously, of one of these streaks. Keith Yandel on the Flyers got his Ironman and broke 1,000 games consecutively played. And, it's interesting because, shortly thereafter, they sat him. They says, okay, you got your streak. You're obviously the Iron Man, but we're going to sit you, and it was funny how the fan base was torn on whether the Flyers should have sat him or not. Truth be told is that Keith Yandel was not having a good season. He should have probably been sat earlier, but I feel that the coach was hindered by the fact that, he had this streak and they were going to let him get to 1,000 games before they made the decision that, I think you're going to sit down and sit out this one. And, the team was like, well, half the fans were like, we think it's ridiculous that you are making this guy have to sit down as a healthy scratch, that he's not hurt instead of playing. And, I was thinking, well, if they tried to trade him to get him to another team so that somebody else could deal with that would be great. But if nobody else wants him, and this team is up.
Oh, my
Welcome
goodness.
to the broadcast, Jack.
You know what? The level of professionalism just went up about 99%.
This is what's known as the broadcaster's version of a slump, where I was working on getting on. I couldn't get a hit, and nothing was working at all, okay? And a simple thing like, I was looking at my old passwords. I jotted them down. But the problem is when you change your password, a new password, remember to write it down. Otherwise, you won't remember it. Because I have like coaches have signs. I have about 54 different passwords. So I kind of have to jot them down. But I don't even know what I missed, guys. But I'm sure the show is going great. I might just sit back and enjoy listening to you two guys.
Rick Sherlock just wrote in, your time is over, Doc. Jeez.
Hey, Jack, you did say you were going to get some airtime today. You said you were going to get some airtime today. Now it's all done.
Well, no. Listen, I was thinking, you talk about boxing where they say styles make fights. You see, Pags, you and I don't mean we're that good, but we're like Jordan and Kobe being on the same team. The mix isn't as good as LeBron and one of those two, because LeBron is going to defer a little more. Both those guys are scorers. Doc is more of a facilitator like Magic Johnson. He'll pass the ball off. You and I got to keep shooting the ball. Okay? So the mix, it's all about the mix.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you put me on the same level as you, Jack, because those are some really big shoes to fill. So.
Well, I don't put myself on that level. I'm just saying style-wise, you're closer to that level than I am.
I doubt that. You don't get put in the Hall of Fame for nothing. So, but to catch you up with where we're at with things, we just talked about the streak that's more likely to be broken out of the three. You had put down DiMaggio or Cal Ripken. I added Hack Wilson's 191 RBIs. I feel that those three are specifically going to be really challenging throughout history to ever get beaten. I mean, and you think when Hack Wilson did the 191 RBIs, I think they were only playing 120 games. So
154, but yeah.
Yeah, so I
but
mean,
it's breakable. You could see someone getting 191 RBIs during the season. I mean, it's going to be hard to break. I mean, the only record that pops off at me at the top of my head that's completely unbreakable is Cy Young's 511. They should investigate that because it's madness. It's crazy. 511 wins. I mean, who did he get him against? I mean, you kind of wonder. I mean, it's so far out there. I mean, a record to be meaningful, there has to be a chance for it to at least be broken, at least a chance. I mean, let's say that someone hits 85 homers in the season. It's conceivable someone could hit 86. Conceivable. You know, maybe the day will come where someone hits 90 homers. But if we ever hear the case of a guy hits 127 homers in a year, I mean, that would be ludicrous. Let's say a guy did it in 1898. He hit 127 homers in the season. Are we going to use that as our benchmark? I mean, it's a certain madness involved.
No, and I can agree with that. I mean, obviously, I know the reason why I added the 191 RBIs is when we looked it up. I mean, it's been since the steroid era that somebody even got as close as 165. And that it's been so big of a gap between what the record is and what average, the highest person every year is. So normally you see somebody at 125, 130, and that is an all-star, if not MVP season, when you're getting 130, 140 RBIs in a season, let alone 191. So, and of course, it was the 30s. It's a little different time. The baseball was different and such like that. I mean, but then you think of the 61 home runs that Roger Maris hit. It was 60 for such a long time with Babe Ruth. And then it took the steroid era to kind of beat that with originally. Then you had Sosa and McGuire get it up to 70, and then 73 with
Bonds.
Thank you very much. It's just the name escaped me.
Well, that's one.
Did you notice that, Jack? I passed it. I got it.
You did.
Yeah, did you see? I'm a facilitator.
Yeah. No, but when I'm saying, Jack, would you agree certain records, okay, Florence Griffin Joyner, there's suspicion. You're a big track and field guy, Doc. I know with running the marathons. Her 10.49, sprint record. Basically, that's so far ahead of any other woman. And there's suspicion under that. I mean, she was never technically found, It's only strong suspicion. Let's leave it at that. There's always a chance, that record's there's a chance that record's completely valid. I'd hate to smear someone's reputation. I'm just talking about public perception here. But it's so far ahead of any other woman. Let's say when Bob Beamon did his long jump, 29 feet, 2 inches and change, they said it was done on the thin air of Mexico City during the 68 Olympics. But couldn't other athletes go to Mexico City just for the purpose of breaking the record? So you kind of wonder some of these records. But getting back to Ripken, can you see anyone, even an ordinary citizen, for 17 years in a row not miss a day's work? I mean, how many teachers have you had, Doc, in your career who've gone 17 years in a row and didn't have to take one day off?
Well, and I don't see. You're absolutely right. People take days off, and we have to. So we have lives, and this is what we were just saying. Cal Ripken Jr. did something that was so remarkable that the streak itself became bigger, I think, on any given day than putting out the best lineup. And I just don't see teams putting themselves in a position where that's going to happen again. And, you look at teams that look at these players because they're so important that they want to keep them healthy. And they're just not going to put a guy into a position where he's going to have to play day in and day out. The Yankees talk all the time about load management. He gets his day off today.
Yeah.
And so I don't think that record's even approachable. The idea with Hack Wilson and the RBIs, the closest anybody who's a non-steroid guy has come was Tommy Davis in 1962 at the LA Dodgers, who drove in 153. And before that, I think it was, Johnny Bench, who had 148 in 1970. The only guys who've even come close in ever since Hack Wilson did that was Manny Ramirez, who had 165 in 1999 in the middle of the steroid era. I just don't see guys driving in runs like that. Now, no one's ever come close to DiMaggio either, but you know what? The idea of possibly getting a hit for 56 straight games, at least that's possible. It could happen. A guy like an Ichiro or a Rod Carew or that type of hitter could do something like that. It's not inconceivable. And even though it hasn't happened, Pete Rose got to 44 games or so, which is only a couple weeks away. So I think they're all pretty much unassailable. But if I had to pick one, I would say DiMaggio's one is at least in the realm of possibility.
But Pax, couldn't you see a scenario where Bryce Harper gets off to an incredible start, and before you know it, he's around 100 RBIs, at mid-season? And with the DH in effect now, he can get basically his rest. He just has to hit. He doesn't have to play the field. And he all of a sudden is eyeing the record. He's on such a roll that the manager's not going to argue, we got to sit you down, and they could DH him. So doesn't the DH make a difference, a big difference with the Hack Wilson record?
Well, yes and no. I feel that there's too many other factors that go into 191 RBIs, because you think about it, even if you were to have the most ridiculous of seasons and hit 91 home runs, you would still need 100 people to get on base before you to get to that 191. And it's not just that Bryce Harper would have to have a great season. He would need 2 or 3 other guys that were also having over, first team seasons, so that like there would be 2 or 3 guys that were getting on base that were hitting about 320 to 350 and getting tons of walks, so that when he was hitting those home runs, that they weren't solo shots, they were 2 and 3 run home runs, so that number could be done. And I think that's the harder part of the 191 RBIs, that you need so many people put together to be able to get to have great seasons. And that's the reason why that 191 is going to withstand, because you always have maybe one or another guy who's able to do it, but not 3 or 4 people on the same team that could have that type of year that 191 RBIs could make sense.
I'm ashamed to say this, guys. I have no idea. I'm sure Doc would look this up quick. I should know, and I'll admit I don't. Who holds the major league record for triples?
Oh, that's probably, I'll look it up right now.
No one even talks about that. And that, I would think, getting a triple far and away is the hardest of all hits to get.
See, and I would think that's, and just off the top of my head, I'd be willing to bet that was done in the 80s. And that's like a Vince Coleman or, maybe even Ricky Henderson having like 30 some triples in a year. I mean, again, I'm just taking a shot in the dark. It could be somebody way askew from that, but that's who I think. When I think of, because I think of stolen bases, the stolen base is a lost art, where it used to be tons of stolen bases in the 80s, and early 90s. And now it's just something that if you get 30 stolen bases, you've done a lot. Before there was 40, Bonds went 40 and 40, 40 home runs, 40 stolen bases. Vince Coleman would have 60 and 70 stolen bases in a season. Ricky Henderson made his life off of stealing bases. And it's just not the same anymore. It's just a different ball game than it used to be.
Well, analytics. Remember the movie Moneyball, where the Oakland A's GM Billy Beane is telling the player, no, you don't steal. That's not what we don't pay you for that.
Right.
Okay. So I guess there's some type of analytics that maybe show stealing isn't the smartest thing to do. But what I don't understand, when they show a catcher's percentage of throwing runners out, it's always less than 50%. That's what I can't figure out.
Right. And you know, it's mathematically easier to score from second than scoring from first, you know, on a single. And that's why it's always better to be when you're in scoring position. That's why they call it scoring position when you're on second base. So if you're able to get on second base, I mean, obviously, JT Realmuto is a great guy who can throw you out at second base and has like a 75 to 80% hit rate. But not all catchers can do that. Not all catchers have that arm and that accuracy. But not all those players just don't have the speed like they used to. It's not, you don't have the quickness to go from point A to point B, you know, first to second, or, you know, better yet, second to third. Stealing home is a long lost art. I mean, you don't ever really hear about that unless there's a double steal going on.
You know what I can't, what I can't figure out, and I want to hear what you have to say on this, Doc. And I felt this way since I was a kid. Since we're talking about the RBI record, I never understood the logic of batting your best hitter fourth because he's cleanup. It's a prestige. It's all nonsense. My logic has always been since I was a kid, bat your best hitter first, meaning the odds are he's going to get up one extra time. You bat your power hitter, your big, a Mike Trout type hitter. You bat him third or fourth. Chances are he's not going to run in the first inning. I mean, he's less likely. Just bat him first. I can understand in a sense the pitches hitting right before the guy going first, but I'd rather take my chance and have my best hitter maybe get up one extra time during the game. And especially at the end of the game, if the game's on the line, you're obviously going to pinch hit for the pitch anyway.
Right. And you know what? I think that was something that analytics actually did.
I knew that before analytics.
Right. Well, no. And that makes sense because it went from, instead of trying to hit grand slams, because that was really the thought process, you would have Mike Schmidt always batting the cleanup spot, and if he was playing on the Phillies now, he would always be in the number 3 spot because that's where you'd want him to be because he is mathematically going to be able to get more at bats that you always want to have him up at the plate as often as you can. So I know that the Phillies 2 years ago actually did that with Bryce Harper where they had him leading off just because they wanted to get him more at bats because he was really all of the offense for the Phillies.
Yeah,
the problem is that you're 7th, 8th, and 9th hitters.
I think Doc had a deal for you on the table 3 weeks ago that he withdrew a manager swap, Aaron Boone for Joe Girardi. About 3-4 weeks ago, I think Doc was ready to sign off on that deal, right, Doc?
Well, maybe I would have. Let me go back because you asked a question. The all-time leader in triples is Owen Wilson. He had 36 in the year 1912. You have to take a long look through the list to get to anybody in recent eras. And it was Lance Johnson of the White Sox who had 21 in 1996. But pretty much by and large, the triple is a record that is Willie Wilson had 21 in 1985. But it's one of those things that it was much more common in earlier days. And you could probably ascribe that to the fact that they had smaller gloves, bigger stadiums, and it was just a different style of play, right? People weren't hitting the ball over the wall. And you're talking about stolen bases and where do you back guys in the lineup and the analytics. The whole idea is you want guys to get into scoring position, and you don't want to get guys thrown out on the base paths. So if a guy doesn't have like an 80% base stealing ratio of success rate, you don't want him to steal because it's going to hurt your opportunities to obviously score if you're getting a guy thrown out at first base and adding an extra out. The whole idea is there's 27 outs in a game and each of those is precious and you don't want to waste any of them anywhere. So I don't know if I agree that you want your best player hitting first, your power hitter hitting first. I get the idea. He might get up one more time and he might be that one guy that comes up late in the game if it just comes around to the number 1 guy. but you also want guys on base in front of them. And if there's, I think, but it also depends on the team. Like the Yankees this year don't have any real base stealing threat guys. They're not a whole lot of on base Ricky Henderson, Tim Raines type of guys. Jimmy Rollins, we just saw his name. The Yankees don't have a whole lot of guys like that. So you want guys who are just going to get on base. But if you have a team where there's guys who can run and create havoc on the base paths, there's also a rationale for having a guy like Ricky Henderson leading off, because he upsets the defense. He opens up more gaps for your next guys to hit the ball through, and that'll also lead to scoring. So I think it really is team dependent.
Well, the Yankees bat Aaron Judge second. To me, that's a tease. Bat him first, you may as well, especially with the DH. I mean, why bat him second? What are the chances of him knocking in a run in the first inning? And Aaron Judge runs well. He could run. He's the equivalent of a leadoff bat as far as speed goes. I mean, he's not that quick, but he's quick enough. So
yeah, but I don't see him stealing bases and creating havoc and like the way Ricky Henderson did.
No, not at all. Not at all.
Well, and then you have like where I can speak intelligently about the Phillies, where they're having a really difficult time figuring out who should be batting first. That they cannot seem to find a leadoff hitter, and they're stuck putting Schwarber up there right now, who happens to be batting below the Mendoza line. And it's hard because I don't think that he should be a number one hitter, but they don't have anybody else to fill in that spot. So it's interesting how the analytics of baseball have changed so much about baseball teams, that you don't have those speed demons that get on base and work walks and, are able to like Suzuki, where he was able to just get on base and get hits and walks. And, then just because he was there, created havoc on the base paths. And he didn't have to steal it. Just because he was there, the pitcher had to think about him an awful lot. So
you got me to think. That's a great point. You got me to think now. New question: what's more likely to happen first? Someone hitting 36 triples, or someone matching Denny McClain's? He won 31 games, winning 30 games. 30 games is a triple record.
Well, I tell you what, let's take our first break, because I want to make sure that I do Mac right with all these breaks and such like that. Yeah. You're going to actually see these commercials now instead of hearing them, because I downloaded all these commercials. So you're going to get a blast from the past throughout all of these. We'll be back here momentarily right after these messages.
My baloney has a first name, it's O-S-C-A-R. My baloney has a second name, it's M-A-Y-E-R. Oh, I love to eat it every day. And if you ask me why, I'll say, 'cause Oscar Mayer has a way with B-O-L-O-G-N-A.
Oscar Mayer, the first name in Bologna.
How's that?
Hey, guys, seen that new driver yet?
Yeah, let's give him the business.
Right.
Make him sing the Schaefer jingle.
Hey, here he is now. Okay, you, up on the barrel.
Okay, rookie, come on.
Every new man's got to sing the Schaefer jingle. But sing. Come on, sing.
You better sing, boy.
Schaefer is the one
Let's hear
beer
it.
to have when you're having more than one.
Sing.
The most rewarding flavor in this man's world for people who are having fun. Schaefer is the one beer to have when you're having more than one. Was that all right?
Not bad, kid.
Mr. Green? Mr. Green?
Yeah.
You need any help?
Mm-mm.
I just want you to know, I think you're the best ever.
Yeah, sure.
Want my Coke? It's okay, you can have it.
No.
Really, you can have it.
Okay.
A Coke and a smile makes me feel good.
see it.
Whole world is smiling with me. Coca-Cola has life. Have a Coke and
Thanks, Mean Joe.
smile.
Don't forget to bring the stuff.
I won't. I have it.
Bye, Dad. I'm going out with friends.
Okay, kiddo. Share your location, please.
Okay.
Parents, be aware of how teens might have access to alcohol in your home.
Okay, don't forget to bring the stuff.
See you soon. Bye, Dad. I'm gonna go see some friends.
Okay, don't be out too late.
I won't.
I'm your father, not your bartender.
Learn more at burnco.gov/do-not-host.
And we're back. It was interesting kind of getting some of these old commercials as when you start to look at them, and I hear them all the time on your guys' show, but I started to try to find them, and it's like, then you go into this hole of old commercials and things that you remember from back in the late 70s and early 80s. It's interesting to kind of remember them all. As you
of
guys
all
did.
those, I love the Mean Joe one the best. That's probably my favorite commercial of all time.
It's interesting as you say that. I have a Mean Joe green jersey. I have two jerseys that are not Philadelphia jerseys. One is a Mean Joe green jersey. The other is a Reggie Jackson Yankees jersey.
Nice.
And I have a Yankees jersey specifically because he was Mr. October, and I'm born in October, so that was kind of why I did that. And for Mean Joe Green, I used to tell everybody that I was the kid in that commercial. And it's funny because, when I tell that story now, some of the people on TikTok, they actually believe me. So
another Philly icon tried to do a commercial. It didn't quite work out. He didn't have the acting skills. Rocky Balboa. Remember, he tried to do his commercial.
Well,
it was quite
I smell nice.
Smell meanly. Yeah. That was Rocky too. Let's just give Rocky credit though. By Rocky 3, he was doing a lot of different ads.
Yeah.
He was doing all sorts of things, meeting presidents, riding his motorcycle, and while he was doing that, Clubber Lang was obviously training much harder, and that led to the defeat in Lang Balboa 1. And thank goodness for Apollo Creed to train Rocky so that Rocky could get his title back.
Are the steps of the museum, is that, as far as landmarks go in Philly, where would that be rated, the Balboa steps?
It is, so that statue and the steps is the number one hit place. When you come to Philadelphia, that's the one spot that everybody wants to visit, beyond the Liberty Bell, beyond, Independence Hall and all the other things that Philadelphia has to offer. The Balboa statue and steps is the number one tourist attraction in Philadelphia. And it's, and of course, the last time I was there, I actually got to meet Paulie. I'm standing there and I'm waiting because a friend of mine was going to take me into the museum. As often as I've lived here all my life, I think I've been in the art museum one time in my entire life. And I was waiting for a friend. We were going to go to the museum, and she was actually at a different museum, but I'm standing there waiting for her. And here comes out at Paulie to go visit the statue. And I got to take a picture with him. He steps out of the car. I'm like, wow, Paulie, you look great. He's like, no, man, you look great.
I've seen Kirk Young at boxing functions. He was a former professional fighter. And the police officer in the movie who holds the ropes for Adrian to get in at the... he doesn't hold it. When Paulie's holding the ropes, the police officer arguing with Paulie to get him out of the ring was actually a former light heavyweight contender, Bobby Cassidy, who I know pretty well. So he had that part. And Spider Rico actually was a former professional fighter who fought Ken Norton. His name's Pedro Lovell. That was the one who was, was Spider Rico. So there was some real life, characters in there.
Well, I tell you what, since we're talking about boxing, I'm going to jump around our list here, and let's talk about Tyson Fury for a second. He's saying that he's retiring, and will that does he really mean it?
I think this is a generic question. We're using Tyson Fury as an example. The fighters retire basically during their prime when they can make a lot of money. how many fighters actually step away? How many athletes, period, step away for good? Unless there's a medical issue or it's very, very rare. I mean, once in a while they do when you think they have a little bit left. I can't imagine Tyson Fury completely stepping away. What he might do in the meantime is do more or less exhibitions. He might join the WWE, for WrestleMania, be given big money for that, a mixed martial arts type thing. But let's say the winner of the Alexander Usyk, Anthony Joshua fight, they're going to be in line to fight him. That's massive money. The public wants to see that. That's a legacy fight for him as well. I can't imagine him staying retired, even though he's saying he is. Listen, we're seeing that in football a little. Tom Brady got the urge. He announced his retirement, and before you know it, he came back. So I'd have to say with Tyson Fury, no, even though he swears he is retired.
Yeah, I would have to agree with you. Even like when George Foreman retired, he wanted to come back and do that. I feel that when you do a sport for so long, that when you stop, you always kind of regret, should I have done one more? I mean, that's how the Rocky franchise actually went on for as long as it did, because he kept wanting to come back. Kept wanting to be able to be, well, they're bringing up this. Hey, what happens if we were to put Rocky versus this guy, and how real is that, and how possible is that? And I kind of feel that all boxers go through that. I mean, let's look at Mike Tyson right now, where Mike Tyson was trying to do like the senior boxing.
Roy
tour.
Jones, he had that exhibition. Yeah, was talking about having more. Yeah.
And it's like, when you think about that, I'm like, I mean, I don't know. A certain amount of money would stop me from wanting to get punched anymore, And it amazes me that Mayweather still is interested in getting back in the ring sometimes. You know what I mean? I guess
he's going to have exhibitions that won't count in this record. Yeah,
and it's all for money. You know what I mean? It's all money done, but. I mean, like I said, he was he wound up going 50-0. He wound up breaking all of the records. So he holds it.
He didn't really break the records. Other fighters had passed 50-0, and then they continued fighting, and then they lost the fight. Guys like Julio Cesar, Chavez, etc.
Got ya. Yeah, because I think of everybody like. Beyond, we had Joe Frazier, of course, who lost, but Larry Holmes, you know what I mean? He was 49-0, and then I think he lost to Tyson. That was
48-0 to Mike Spinks. Yeah. Spinks, I mean, records are manufactured in boxing. What do you think, Doc, with Tyson Fury? You think he's coming back, or?
Yeah, so I was talking to Pags about this before the show. I haven't really. I wrote to you earlier in the week. It's something I didn't really look into. I think we sometimes are impressed when the great athlete says, I'm going to hang them up, and the great athlete really does hang them up, and they want to go out on top. That doesn't happen often, but when it does, it's like DiMaggio. He said, the Yankees wanted him to come back for more. He didn't have a great year in 1951, and so he said, no, I'm done. But I think oftentimes you see, like you just saw with Tom Brady, a guy says, I think I'm going to be done. The Brady thing, I think, felt, at least to me, a little bit manufactured. Like some guy on the NFL Network, Adam Schefter, whatever, it's like, oh, I have the breaking news. He's going to retire. And then he does retire. And they started talking about it. Like, is this going to be his last game? Is this like, it was almost like they were making a story out of something that wasn't there. And I think maybe Brady got caught up in that, and he's like, yeah, maybe I should retire. And then he realized he wasn't ready, and he's going to obviously come back. But you do see that all the time. Fighters who retire, or athletes who retire, who come back. I think when you make that decision to retire, you ought to be pretty darn sure that you're making the right decision before you say it. So
it's hard to retire when you're on top. Take the case of Mike Mussina in 2000.
He did it. Yep.
20 games for the first time in his career. He retired, and he probably regrets it because the Yankees won the World Series the next year, and he was never a World Series winner, but he did make it into the Hall of Fame. But usually when someone has something left to offer, they won't retire. Even look at the great Albert Pujols. He's getting paid a little over $2 million a year for the Cardinals. So it certainly is not about the money, but these athletes, they want to push it to the last drop a lot of times. But you do get cases where there are family considerations and they just kind of want to walk away. Like Scott Brocious, he had a little more to give. And but for the most part, they push it to the last drop, I think.
You bring up the Mussina and the Yankees winning the World Series. People bring that up with Mattingly, too. They say if he had only stayed in 96, he would have been part of a World Series. I don't necessarily ever agree with that line of thinking. Who's to say that if Mussina was a Yankee in 2009 that he would have been any good, or that Mattingly had played in 96? If Mattingly played in 96, they wouldn't have had Tino. And didn't Tino do a big role in the Yankees winning the World Series? I love Mattingly, but the assumption that if he was on the team, the Yankees would have also still won the World Series isn't necessarily correct. And maybe Mussina wouldn't have been part of it. I've listened to Mussina a number of times, and I don't think, I mean, how do we know? We'd have to get into his head and really have an honest conversation with him. But I don't get the sense that he's upset that he retired. He felt he did his thing and he won his 20 games and he walked away.
You know, and I, to be honest, I would have liked to see him on the Yankees because then the Phillies might have won that World Series. So, you know, obviously we had, you know, Pedro Martinez and Cliff Lee, and they weren't part of the 2008 World Series, but they were the only you know, they won the 2 games in the, you know, Cliff Lee always had the Yankees number, and Pedro seemed to, you know, have them that season, you know, so. You know, had Mussina might have been there, we might have won that World Series, and you know, it would have bบbeen a whole different thing. We'd had back to back rather than the Yankees winning their last World Series. So, but anyways, I'm assuming this is coming from Mac. He's at people that retired maybe a little early, or you know, in their prime was Jim Brown.
Voluntarily? We should say they just did it because they wanted to. Jim Brown. He was filming a movie, and the Cleveland Browns told him, you have to report or you're going to get fined. We're going to do this and that. And then he said, the heck with it. You're not going to bully me around. I'm just retiring and doing movies, and that's case closed. So had they left it to Jim Brown completely and allowed him to report the training camp at his own pace, he wouldn't have retired, actually. And Rocky Marciano, he had some managerial issues. He didn't trust his manager. Plus, he had a bad back. So, you know, the rigors of training. So he kind of 50% voluntarily retired. And then he trained to make a comeback when Ingemar Johansson was a champion. But he saw it was very difficult to train the way he wanted to, have that same drive and determination. It's like if Doc kept away from running marathons for 5 years and then had to make a comeback, he might not have that same drive, you know, to put in the miles.
Well, yeah, and it's funny because Rick mentions Robert Smith of the Vikings, but I think more along those lines, Barry Sanders. Barry Sanders was somebody, even Megatron. And you could say, well, that had more to do with the team itself, the franchise itself that he played for, rather than, you know, maybe him wanting to retire as a player. I mean, I think, you know, Jason Peters, that's the first thing that comes to my head is that, you know, Jason Peters probably should have retired 2 years ago, and he's still trying to squeeze every last drop that he can of playing because he just doesn't want to stop. You know, some players just don't know when to throw in the towel because they don't, you know, they live the lifestyle so strongly that it's more important to live the lifestyle than it is to get out of it. And I wonder at what point, because Jason Peters is obviously a Hall of Famer, but at what point do you stay too long that it starts to affect that? Instead of maybe being a first ballot, you go second or third ballot because people remember the poor seasons that you played rather than the Hall of Fame career that you had. And that's, you know, that's a thin line that you have to traverse to try to, you know, maintain that.
Is there such thing as an athlete embarrassing himself, really, to the public? That's why DiMaggio quit when he did. He was a guy of great pride. When his performance slipped, he was embarrassed, and that was his weak link. Willie Mays, diving, stumbling football in the outfield in the 73 World Series? Did he really embarrass himself? Is this, I don't think in this day and age, a manager, coach is going to allow a player to embarrass himself because they want to win. And if he's performing poorly, he's not going to be in the lineup for long. What do you guys think?
Well, I'll let Doc take this one first.
Yeah, I think pride has a lot to do with it. You know, back in the day, Marciano, Jim Brown, Joe DiMaggio, the players also didn't make the kind of money that they make today. So you mentioned Albert Pujols. He's going to get $2 million to play this year. That's not small change. And so, I mean, do people keep wanting to chase the dollars? Of course they will. But I think it really is just a personal decision, player by player, depending on the situation and what their life circumstances are. You know, the old adage is that every fighter thinks he has one last good fight in him. And you have to then be willing to get in the training and go through everything you have to do in order to do that. And, you know, sometimes you might say that the smart fighters realize that, you know what, I've gave it everything I have. I had a great career and it's time for me to hang them up. And I want to hang them up while I still can. And I still have all my facilities. And, you know, I don't go through the same fate that some other great fighters did in their later lives because I stayed in the ring too long and I got hit too many times.
Yeah, and that goes back to where I think, like, once you get paid a certain amount of money, how can you step back into the ring? Like, how, you know, I tell you, if I got paid $100 million to fight, you know, that $100 million would take the fight out of me. I don't know that I'd want to get punched in the face anymore.
Let me tell you, you could always use more money. Listen, it sounds like bad what I'm saying. Let's say you have 300 million. Wow, anyone could retire, live in complete luxury. I know the way you guys think, especially you Pags. You're going to want to buy a sports franchise. You're going to look to up the ante. Could you buy the Philadelphia Flyers? Could you buy?
I knew it was coming. I knew it was coming.
Right. You're in the midway point, and you can continue on and get a few hundred more million, and that could be the difference maker. Wow. If I can make more, I can actually buy a sports franchise. I mean, I would love that myself. I mean, we all would. Imagine that. Imagine, Doc, you own the Yankees. I mean,
if I own the Yankees, they'd go 162-0 every year.
You'd be more demanding than Steinbrenner, maybe.
Yeah, could you imagine?
No multi-year. I don't know what they win. You wouldn't give out many multi-year contracts. You would keep short contracts. I would love to see one manager / coach like Walter Alston work his career on 1-year contracts. Just pay me a nice big sum for the year, and I'm going to work 1 year after the other. But just put a clause in, you can't fire me till the end of the year. So you can't get impulsive if you're in a 2-week slump. I'm gone. Those days are over. If a manager coach has 1 year left on their contract, the media goes crazy. How come they're not extending them? They're saying they're showing a lack of confidence. Speaking of that, shouldn't the Phillies, Doc, show some extra confidence in Joe Girardi and give him an extension, perhaps?
Because I think you're trolling the Philly sports guy here, Jack. We brought up Joe Girardi a couple times here.
Well, he's our guy. We have more of a link to him than Pags. He was our guy for not only 10 years as a manager, but as a player. I mean, we have more of a bond with Girardi than Pags has.
And you could have him back. You guys could have him back. I feel like that he's just so uninterested here. And it's becoming more and more apparent. I feel that, like I said, the first season he lost a couple of games that there was games that went into that 42 that I talk about all the time. Last year, I felt the same way. I feel like even this last loss, you know, definitely is put on his shoulders. That how do you send those pitchers out there when they just got crushed by the Mets the week before? All of a sudden, they're going to pitch better. You know, and it was like once they started to get to them, you went from one pitcher who got crushed by the Mets to another pitcher who got crushed by the Mets, and you wind up giving up that historic loss because, like I said, it was 0-326, where any team was down 6 runs going into the 9th. Well, that's changed now. Now it's 1-326, and I blame Girardi.
You know what's interesting? The sensitivities of baseball. The Mets wiped out a 6-run lead in the last inning. Let's say the Phillies had tried to get an extra run, played aggressive, bunted a guy over, tried to squeeze an extra run. The Mets would have been furious. They would have thrown at a Philly batter. That's the mentality of baseball, and I'm kind of annoyed. If a team has a 14-run lead going into the last inning, don't try to squeeze out a run. That gets to be a little ridiculous. But 6 runs is doable on occasion. And it happened. The lightning bolt happened against the Phillies.
Well, and I hear that. But going into the 9th inning, I mean, you had a pitcher that pitched 10 pitches to a 1-2-3-8. And you didn't send him back out there because analytics said not to. That you weren't in a safe position, so you didn't bring in your closer. And you had 2 guys that you maybe wanted to get their heads right. And maybe that was his thought process. Like, hey, we have such a big lead right here that maybe by getting them out there and they collect these outs, we can go ahead and do it. That ultimately the odds of them batting through the lineup and scoring 7 runs in 1 inning seems a little ludicrous to think that that's really going to happen. And of course, the snake bites, and then now all of a sudden, now they didn't play yesterday, so they couldn't even put that loss behind them because now it sits for another 24 hours, and it may sit for another 24 hours because we're still stuck in this rain. So it's a possibility that for 48 hours after this, that they have been marinating in that loss.
I don't know whether Doc remembers this game, whether he saw it on TV at the time. But ironically, the Yankees had a 6-run lead when Girardi was the manager. And I remember who they were playing. And Mariano was warming up in the bullpen. And Michael Kay was absolutely disgusted because Mariano had been busy as of late. But it was as if it was an emergency situation with a 6-run lead. And so who knows that? But
and he was the best closer in the game ever. So unfortunately, the Phillies do not have those types of bullpen pitching. Although the bullpen has been better this year, this wasn't even a save opportunity that they blew. They just blew it. And it's to have heard the Mets fans for the last 2 days has been fairly annoying. But as part of what it is, that's kind of just what happens a little bit. And since we're just going to talk about that real quick, Jack, what is your thoughts? I mean, you mentioned Girardi a few times. You think he should just stick it out with?
Yeah, I'm a big believer, guys, in stay the course. Girardi's a proven manager. Okay, the guy's proven, and wait to the end of the season. Nothing's gained moving on from him during the season, unless what you say is accurate, because you're around Girardi, see him a lot more than I do, observe him a lot more than I do. If he's truly lost interest, he's bored, he's checked out, then you got to let him go. You got to move on. But knowing Joe Girardi, I can't believe he's checked out. I think it's probably he's just frustrated over things going, and he's a sensitive individual too to criticism. So that has to bother him an awful lot. But I say you just stay the course. Look at the Atlanta Braves last year. They struggled all year. Finally, at the end, they edged out the Phillies, won the division. They won, I think, 88 games, and yet they won the World Series. They kind of stayed the course, even though everyone had them basically buried during the year. And that's what I think with Girardi. If they don't make the playoffs this year, that's 3 years in a row they haven't made the playoffs. Then it's valid to make a move at that point. But I'd leave him alone this season and just basically live or die with the job Joe Girardi's doing.
When that question came up, what I wanted to look at was the predictions that teams, that writers were making about the Phillies. And so I looked at a lot of different sites, and most people didn't have the Phillies winning the division. And even most people didn't even have the Phillies as a wild card team. So the fact that they're not in it right now seems to be what everybody thought was going to happen anyway. I haven't watched Joe Girardi on a day-to-day basis since he left the Yankees. I felt he was a very good manager on the Yankees, and I felt that he got a raw deal getting them within a game of the World Series and then not being brought back. But if you're watching the team on a day-to-day basis and they're not showing energy and they're not showing life, every manager blows a game or blows a series of games by making decisions about pitching staffs and resting guys. When it happens on the Yankees, obviously I get frustrated because we always think we know better, but there's a whole lot of stuff that also happens behind the scenes. This guy's not feeling well. That guy's got a pulled muscle. Any number of things that could be happening. This guy's wife is sick. His kids just called up. They didn't get into the college they wanted or whatever it might be. There's any number of reasons why a player just might not have it for that day. And then the manager has to work within that. He's never going to go out and say, yeah, Jimmy didn't feel well today or, had too much to drink last night or something like that in the post game. They're just going to say, I had to make the decision not to use Bob. And I went this other direction because it seemed like the right move at the time. And the manager's supposed to just take the hits for the team. That's what a good manager does. So if he's disinterested, which seems out of character, but again, I'm not watching him, then maybe it is time for him to move on. But for Phillies fans to say that they expected a big year in 2022, I just don't know how accurate that is based upon all the predictions that I looked on a variety of different sites about where they saw the Phillies going this year.
Well, and just to do this before we go to our second break, my thoughts were that they brought in all this hitting and that they did upgrade their bullpen where we broke records last year with blown saves. I think we had 26 typically before before we hit the 2/3 area of the season. So had we won a third of those games, we would have won the NL East easily. And it wouldn't have mattered that Atlanta came in with, wound up with 88 wins because we'd have been well over 90. So this year, it's a little different where we're not blowing those saves. The hitting hasn't really come up yet. They haven't really started to get the bats hot. And I feel that they have to remain somewhere around 500 up until July 4th. And then after July 4th, I think that they could go on a tear and actually work their way, not necessarily maybe win the East because of how well the Mets are playing right now, but get in as a wild card and have the bats propel them to do that. I feel that right now, just with some of the moves that he's making, it just seems, like I said, when they played against the Mets and that umpire warned both benches, and then the next pitch he plunks Alec Boehm, I felt that it was, the fact that he didn't get excited about that. His head was in the binder looking at his analytics rather than sticking up for his player. And the Mets pitcher never got ejected, even after the warning just happened. And this guy got hit dead center in the back. How is that, not taking your job seriously? That shows me disinterest. And I feel like even when Schwarber went nuts about the umpire, Angel calling strikes, and he did that whole little dance. When he went out there, he wasn't very animated. You could tell like maybe he was a little upset, but truth of the matter is that, that's when you want your manager to get kicked out a little bit. So I feel that that's a shame that we're dealing with this right now. And unfortunately, different than New York, Philly, being in Philly, you can't hide by another team. So it's, the Mets can sometimes hide behind the Yankees. The Yankees could do the same with the Mets. The Giants and the Jets, same type of situation.
Max, would you fire him now? Or does he have a timeline by you? That's what I want to know. And Doc, would you hang on to Girardi if you were the Phillies?
Oh, I just did that for you, Pags.
All right, thank you.
Sent you that link. Or sent Jason that link.
Right, perfect.
Well, Doc, you first. Do you fire Girardi or not, or do you give him the season?
I think I give him the season because he has a track record. And again, I don't think a lot of people thought the Phillies were going to be a major player this year anyway. So you can't hold it against him that the team's been mediocre if basically everybody thought the team was going to be mediocre.
And Pags, do you fire him or give him the season?
No, I would let him go. I would let him go. I feel that I've seen enough of his body of work, and I before this season, especially after the loss that we just had, this season it could really start to get away from us after suffering a loss like that. And if you lose the locker room a little bit, you've lost it completely. And I feel that we're really wavering on that right now. And that's what makes me the most nervous about how this is going to proceed. So, and let's take our second break. And when we come back, we'll be able to bring on Jason Gonzalez. Hopefully, he'll be able to have gotten the link and come on in. So we'll go right to our second break, and we'll be back in just a moment. I feel like Mac when he's doing his thing.
When Joe gets hungry, he gets mean.
So I grab myself a Swanson Hungry Man dinner, and I feel nice. A big dinner with all the fixings, and look at all that beef. Swanson already put the second helping in.
I'm a meat and potatoes man.
Hey, have a Hungry Man entree. Just meat and potatoes, and plenty of meat. Swanson Hungry Man dinners
and entrees. Enough to turn a mean man into a
pussycat.
When you drive to Wendy's and order a single, you get more beef than the Whopper or the Big Mac. At Wendy's, you never have to ask, where's the beef?
Anyone else?
My name is David, and in 8 years, I'll be an alcoholic.
Hi, David.
I'll start drinking in middle school, just at parties. But my parents won't start talking to me about it till high school. And by then, I'll already be in some trouble.
Kids who drink before age 15 are 5 times more likely to have alcohol problems when they're adults.
The thing is, my parents won't even see it coming.
So start talking.
Who's next?
Before they start drinking.
I mean, you can see right now, without LeBron, Lakers are struggling.
Let me tell you about a team I hate, all right? I know the Dallas Cowboy fan is here, so I had to make sure he knew how much I hate this team.
I'm ready. I've often said that the people who run baseball, they try very hard to ruin it.
I'm from Brooklyn. I don't have a problem saying it to his face.
Oh, I'm from Brooklyn.
Hey, guess any.
And we're back. So, and we're just waiting for Jason to come on here in just a moment.
I hope he comes on. He's reporting directly from Kentucky by the track. I think he's there today. This morning.
Yeah, and that's why I'm even interested, because I wonder if they're getting the same amount of rain that we're getting up here in the Northeast, and what that track was going to be like, and what that really does with the horses. I remember a couple of years ago, there was one of the races where it was just a sloppy mess. And because of that, I think it was one of the middle tier horses wound up winning that race. And it actually was a surprise. And then, of course, they made him the favorite in the Preakness. And it didn't even, he wasn't even in the top 3. So I'm interested to see how much of that really does play a difference with this field. But we'll
Jason
see.
just did a great article for the Louisville Journal Courier, in the medical examiner for the Kentucky Derby. They had the big controversy with Medina Spirit, who had won the race, but then the victory was taken away. And then later the horse, died of a heart attack. And because of, PED use, we don't think of PED use in horses. We think about human beings, and it's a whole, big thing still there. And, as far as cleaning up that sport.
And I think about that because obviously Baffert is one of the trainers or owners that is always got a horse in the Kentucky Derby. And, when you think of this,
he's banned now. He's banned from participating
because of what came out in that report. So I'm interested to see, how much of that is really going on throughout, horse racing. Because this is, I mean, they call this the sport of kings. And realistically, it's because they call it the sport of kings because you need to have a ridiculous amount of money to be able to deal with these types of things. And, when there were a couple of horses from Philadelphia, I mean, there was one Philadelphia horse. It was after Smarty Jones, who did win 2 legs of the Triple Crown, but wasn't even able to get studded out because he was just a regular, normal everyday horse. And then I think he wound up getting, shot because I think he broke his leg. I don't even remember that guy's name, but it was the horse's name. But he jumped the gate early and they wound up like cracking his leg. And instead of scratching him like they should have, they made him run the race. And then, of course, they had to, put the horse down there right on the track, which is unfortunate to have to say, but that they weren't able to even stud that horse out. And of course, that's how you make your money. It's not winning these races. It's studding the horse out to all those mares so that you can, maybe get new horses that have those types of lungs. Because really,
Guys,
it's the
how
lungs
many
that
people you think who bet on the race are betting with any knowledge, or they just look at the names and they get a feeling about the name and they link the name to something? Like myself, I'm not, if I put a bet on a horse race, and I don't bet much, it would be one of the horses running, I think it's called Happy Jack, if I'm not mistaken.
That is correct. There is a Happy Jack.
I haven't bet yet, but if I have a chance, I might put like $10 on Happy Jack.
I forget what, I don't even have the list up in front of me, but Jack, I don't follow horse racing at all, and I don't bet ever. But I always, on the horse racing day, on a Kentucky Derby day, I look at the names and I pick somebody, and there's somebody, Smiling Face. What was his name? I don't even remember his name anymore.
I thought it was another Happy.
Yeah,
so
right.
Happy Jack is going off at 21-1. You were taught Smile Happy at 14.
Smile Happy, that's my guy. I don't know anything about him.
There's a horse named Messier. For
Messier, you think of Mark Messier with the Rangers.
He's 7-1. He's 7-1. The Pioneer of Medina, Simplification, which it has that in the horse name. See, like that kind of resonates to me, because usually like great horses have like that, Secretariat or
Simplification's a great name.
I agree. The Cyber Knife, he's at 14-1. Tawny Port at 67-1. Ethereal Road, Rich Strike, and Rattle and Roll wound up being scratched for this race. So there's 21 horses running. I remember a time when there was only like 14 or 15. It seems like everybody wants to get in these races now. I think that's really a lot in a field. So trying to choose out of 21 makes it really difficult to do like even like an exacta, let alone a trifecta or a superfecta. So that those numbers really start to escalate when you try to get 3 or 4.
Smarty Jones getting hurt coming out of the gate. Is that a big hazard? Because I know as a runner, I mean, now I would get it. If I was running a race, I'd get towards the back anyway, because time isn't as important. But I remember how it used to scare me, and I don't know how you felt about this, Doc. You're towards the front, okay? I'm talking about a shorter race, 5K, 10K, whatever. And you have, especially these runners who can barely keep a 10-minute pace, but they come tearing out at the start of the race. They have no concept of pacing themselves, a small percentage, and you're scared they're going to trip you up and that you're going to get trampled by the other runners right behind them. I mean, how much of a hazard is that in horse racing, you think?
I have no idea about horse racing. I know in marathons and in shorter races and things like that, I always want to be as close to the front as I can.
Yeah.
But that was the old me, right? Back when I was younger. When I ran Chicago in 2006, they had the elites, and then the best group was called Purple, I think. And I was in that purple group. So I was right on the front before the next group. And ran my best race of my life there. So I thought it was fun there, because most of the time I'm just in the middle of the pack. And now I'm just running to complete rather than compete in a marathon. The only one I'm competing against is me, and trying to just see if I can make it to the end.
But horse racing is the same concept of, let's say, a race around the track with elite world-class runners. You get boxed in, it's a problem. But it scares me, the jockeys on the horse, because unlike a spill around the track where someone could get hurt, but the odds are they're not going to get permanently disabled if a runner gets knocked over. Odds are he's just going to be knocked out of the race, basically, the way Mary Decker was in the '84 Olympics. But it scares the heck out of me, you know, because if you fall and the horse is behind you that could step on you, it's scary to me.
Well, and that's what makes it really nervous on 21 horses being in the field. I mean, I feel like so these horses, when they win races to even qualify for the Kentucky Derby, they're usually going up against 9, 12, maybe a really large field of 14 horses. So to have 22, these horses don't really run like that. They never have that much traffic on a track. So I find that this is a really interesting race. And then, of course, once this race is over, half of this field isn't even going to go to the Preakness because they'll take it off, because if you've lost, you want to go and get ready for the Belmont. So you want your course to almost rest up so that you could make sure that you win one leg of the Triple Crown, where it's a very much smaller field in the Preakness, where you go from 22 sometimes down to like 10 or 12. And then when you go to the Belmont, it goes up to about 14 or 15 so that if you did happen to win the first 2 legs, you're going up against fresh horses that haven't run in those races, that last race. And, they're going after to make sure that you don't win the Triple Crown. So, and I feel like that's a lot different than what it was in previous, when you think about the horse racing, even 10 years ago, every horse that was a favorite went in every race, and there was like the same 14 horses, maybe went down to 10 for the Preakness, but it was the same 14 that went in the Belmont. And I feel like that's so much changed since then. And like I said, I don't know enough about horse racing and what really distinguishes one horse from being better than another, other than the lineage. It's like you think I saw something the other day on Facebook where they inflated some horses' lungs, and it was just the lungs that you saw, and just how massive they are. Like, even compared to a human body, they are like, you're out here with your arms on trying to just get your hands around them. And that's really what determines what makes a horse run faster or not. Obviously, is the size of their heart and their lung capacity. And it's kind of amazing when you think about it, and you have all these majestic animals that are being trained and doing whatever. But then you have somebody like Baffert who's like, okay, well, I'm going to give him steroids and I'm going to see if I can, get away with this. And of course, he's banned right now, but he's got that type of money. He's got the type of influence. He's going to be back in the sport again, because he's got enough horses there. You know what I mean? That whether he's there or not, his horse is there somehow because somebody else is just acting owner, and he's a silent partner now.
Guys, how much money does it take to own a horse that could qualify for the Kentucky Derby? I have an idea about sports franchises. Obviously, some are a lot more expensive than the others. But how much money, do you really need to own a horse that realistically could qualify for the Kentucky Derby?
I remember saying something about that Smarty Jones. And it wasn't Smarty Jones. It was the next horse, and I can't remember that one's name. That escapes me, but that horse ran at Philadelphia Park. It was like you said, he wasn't able to get studded. It was not a horse that was expected to win anything at all, and then wound up winning 2 legs of the Triple Crown. And they owned him for like $60,000. But the hardest part about having a horse is, feeding it. It's just like having a child, except they eat tremendous amount more. And you got to make sure that somebody's walking and somebody's grooming them and changing the shoes all the time. And, that all of those different things. I mean, I live fairly close to Chester Downs, and I do see some of the horses and going in and out of there. And I have had some friends that were horse trainers, not necessarily in horse racing, but just having horses and training them and to do work and things of that nature. And all of the care that's involved with that. I mean, it is an expensive endeavor to take on. And that's the hard part about owning a horse, is that's why it's the sport of kings, because you need a king's ransom to be able to afford to, take care of the horse.
That I just realized, guys, horse racing is, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, if you think I am, is the only sport in which an animal is more popular than a human. Take races in track and field, marathon. None of them are as popular. It's very rare race is going to garner the same attention as a horse race. I mean, you had Ben Johnson against Carl Lewis in the '88 Olympics. That was a little bit of an aberration, but any road race, any Olympic event, I mean, it just doesn't compare to a horse race. It doesn't create the same buzz.
No, in fact, the last race in total that I remember really trying to pay any bit of attention to was a swimming. For watching the Olympics, for that, to see if he was going to get Phelps was going to get his gold medals. And break
what
the
is
gold
23rd gold medal? It's devalued. That's a little too much.
Right. But that's kind of the, when I think of racing, you think of horse racing. I'm not a NASCAR fan. However, NASCAR is a very popular sport, but horse racing, the Kentucky Derby and the Triple Crown, and maybe you could add the Breeders' Cup to that, is like the only, because greyhounds don't do that. In fact, they're trying to even edge them out anymore, that they don't have greyhound tracks. But that's the only sport that I can think of that really has the least amount of human interaction when it comes to the actual race and the event itself. I mean, it's minimal. Obviously, somebody's riding the horse, but
Doc, that's why Lou Piniella is one of George Steinbrenner's favorites, because they go to the track, they bump into one another there. So there was kind of like a bond meeting at the track.
It's interesting. Yeah. It's something I never got into and followed in any way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I would definitely say it's something that is dwindled over time, because I remember my grandfather would say to me all the time that he was going to the Phillies to go watch the Phillies. And I always thought it was baseball. And there would be a couple of times he'd tell me, and there wouldn't be a baseball game on. I'm like, what is he talking about? I didn't realize he was going to the track. So it's kind of interesting to see, how they were able to pull that off, especially in Philadelphia, because I was a young kid. I didn't know any better. I'm like, oh, the Phillies aren't even playing today. Oh, my Phillies are, you know what I mean? And just that he would go walk, run out and do his thing. And that was just kind of what they did. And like I said, there are still some local establishments that will have all of the races showing like they would at a casino, like they have the off-track betting and stuff like that, where there are guys that come in and they're typically older and they are watching the horse races and they have their slips and they know exactly what horse is what and what they're doing. And, and I think about like all of the, every day doing that and trying to keep up with what horse has done what and how that horse won here and how much longer is the track here and what difference becomes what. And, that's what makes the Triple Crown so interesting, is that all three races are different. They are three different types of track, and, one's on grass, one's on dirt, one, I think is on a little bit of a clay. And I think that's kind of like tennis, where you have the US, the French, and the Australian Open and things like that. And then Wimbledon, where they're all different types of, playing fields. And that's, adds to the flavor of why it's like a Grand Slam or the Triple Crown and things of that nature. So, there's all of my horse knowledge.
I'm just curious, the betting totals, the Kentucky Derby compared to, let's say, the Super Bowl. the NCAA tournament or whatever. I'm just curious the different sports, which would, what does the public take to the most? I mean, I think horse racing by nature is a betting person's sport. I mean, we could watch baseball, football, and not be concerned, put a penny down and enjoy the game fully. But I know Doc's not a betting man, but let's say Doc was on vacation, Doc, with your family, and you're in Kentucky, and you're able to have access to go see the Kentucky Derby, get reasonable seats. You'd probably do it because you'd enjoy the sporting event. But once you're inside, how could you not put down a $20 bill once you're inside? The same way people put me down when I go to a fight out in Las Vegas. Oh, you didn't bet. I don't bet at the casinos. Yet I hear it from other people. You didn't bet? What kind of time could you have had? I'm there for the fights and the atmosphere. But they nearly guilt me into putting down, $10, $15, just throw it in just so I could say I bet.
I wouldn't mind going to the Kentucky Derby. My one son, Ethan, and I have this goal of, seeing the greatest athletes playing and going to all the big events. So, I mean, is that on the bucket list of something to say, yeah, I've been to the Kentucky Derby one day. Yeah, maybe we'll do it someday. But to be honest, it's not very high on my list because it's an event because it's a big event, but the interest level for me isn't there. And if I'm there, would I put a bet on a horse? Maybe. I think it costs a lot of money just to get into the event. So that might be my spending for the day. Maybe I'll get a hot dog. Do they do hot dogs or just mint juleps? I don't know. What can you eat at the Kentucky Derby?
It's funny because I've been to the Galt House, which is the big hotel down there. And it's interesting to, just that place is very interesting in general, but it is specific to Kentucky Derby. That's the place where you go to go stay, to go watch the Kentucky Derby. And then it's, I got to imagine, I mean, you guys are close to the Belmont, right? Have you ever been to the Belmont track?
I've been there, not for the Belmont Stakes. My friends would have once a year, we would meet we did this for a few years in the afternoon, late Friday afternoon, and then we go out to dinner, but we would bet on the horses, like I'd put down $5 a race and I'd wind up probably losing about $20 total at the track, but it's a fun thing to do.
Yeah, and that's
they used to have the races at the Meadowlands. Do they even still have the races at the Meadowlands?
Well, I thought they have a track there still.
Do they still have a track?
I don't know.
I've been down there a number of times, a long time ago, when I was in high school. And I guess when you turn 18, you can bet. So that was something we sometimes would do. We'd go down and waste our money. But yeah.
Well, hey, listen, these 2 hours went fast. I mean, I'm not used to being on this show with you guys.
I came in the game late. I was summoning out of the bullpen.
Jack,
bad move. The viewers want to fire whoever got me into the game.
Jack, the principal in me says that you need to stay for 30 more minutes. You have a detention.
I got a detention.
I'm sorry.
There you go. So you get to stay by yourself while we're done.
Players Union, whoever represents me. We're living in a different era.
And I don't know. There might be something in your contract different than our contract, but hopefully you can get that worked out with all the arbitrators.
I couldn't technical difficult. Oh, guys, I was trying to get on. Mac could vouch for this. Mac was trying to get me through the steps, and I finally got on. Listen, I'm sure I botched up the show that you guys.
No, it was great. We always love having you. You
like I said, people actually got to hear the doc talk. So they're not used to that when you're on the show.
Doc's patient. I wish I had his patience to listen. Yeah.
But everybody, thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully Mac will be back tomorrow. If not, you may see me again. But otherwise, hopefully he's feeling much better and everything is happening great. But thank you for joining us today. And we'll see you tomorrow on another Mac and Jack show.